Hi, this is Randy Altman with Post Perspective. We're here with Mark Pederson, who introduced a new product this week called Colourlab.Ai. He's working with partner Steve Bays and color scientist Dato Valentic. Mark, welcome.
My pleasure to be here, Randy.
You guys had an exciting announcement this week with this new product that is essentially in beta. Why don't you tell everybody what it is and how you guys are rolling it out?
Right. So the product is called Colourlab.Ai, and one of the primary functions of it is to use AI to create the best possible perceptual color matches. So if you think about, the traditional color grading process, if you were to sit in, for example, a DI for a feature film and watch the color grading process, it's surprising how much amount of time is spent doing sort of tedious, um, less creative aspect of it, right? So you work with a cinematographer, a director, and you'll create a look. We call it a reference look, and then you've got to match it down through a sequence. Now, there's a whole lot of subjectivity, of course, in this craft, right? Because what one person says matches and is not the best match for someone else, right? But you've got to work it through a scene, and because of the actual content and the contrast ratios in these shots, you can't just copy and paste, sort of a magic bullet looks, or you can't just copy and paste across a scene and always get any kind, a proper result, right? So essentially what this application is doing is it's using a very advanced custom neural engine that is trained on cinematic models. So the AI that is in Color our models are specifically trained to understand what a close-up is, what an over-the-shoulder is, and understand if there is edge light or backlight and etc. So this allows our color matching engine to make smarter choices. But I think that the biggest thing, or the most exciting thing to me in the application, is that when the AI makes what it thinks is the best color match, it's not just making an image adjustment. We actually extract those changes into the user control lift, gamma, gain, or printer lights. We extract those changes. So essentially, it's a non-destructive thing. Essentially, we're essentially moving the lift, gamma, gain wheels or the printer lights in the exact way that an assistant colorist would prep, in a much bigger DI shop, for example, a very high-end colorist who's in a lot of demand at Company 3 or a place like that. They don't do every single thing, that the primary colorist is doing the primary grading, but there is an assistant that is, doing the, still subjective and still important, but working through those scenes, right?
Are there settings that you put in? Are you putting in a LUT? Like, is there a baseline that the systems work?
Okay, so yeah, I can walk you through a couple aspects of it. So first of all, it is a color managed application. So in order to do what it does, it needs to know what camera the footage has come from. Okay. Now we have in the beta, there's an initial layer. It's not as deep and smart as we're going to go with it, but there is an initial layer that gets it pretty accurately, can figure out, it depends on which file types they are, but it guesses pretty well. And it comes up with a screen to say, verify this footage is from this camera and this footage is from that camera. Later on, we're going to add another layer, a smarter metadata layer, where we think we can get it to the point that it's incredibly rare that we won't know exactly what camera your footage is from. So you may have to do a couple little settings in there, but we do a pretty good job right now of recognizing, very standard formats, cameras, ARRI, Sony, Red, etc. So it's color matched in that it's working from a common color point, a common color space that we've defined. So it's sort of like a mini ACES or ACES for everyone else. You can work in full complete ACES in the application if you want. That's an option. But in the basic mode, you then have the ability to add what we call a show look, okay? And our show look is what it really is it's a 3D LUT, except it is to our specific, camera agnostic target, and it has no ODT, it has no output transform. Okay. So we actually call that file an XO1, and we made a little encrypted format only for the purpose of people not using it incorrectly if they take it out of the system. So we provide a bunch of these, like, film emulation looks, and some stylized looks that Dado has created himself. And then we, of course, have a function where you can upload your 3D LUT. And then you have to say in that process, you say, this was created for an Alexa, and yes, this has a 709 transform on it, and it will strip out that 709 transform and move it to our XO1 show look format, right? So, you would apply that to a shot, right? You would pick your, it comes from, in episodic television and feature films, a lot of people will have the expression show LUT, and there will often be one LUT, one creative LUT for the whole show. Now, that's not always the case. Sometimes you'll have a flashback sequence or dream sequence, or if there's two periods in the show. But quite often, many of my friends who are big DITs on these big shows in New York, there's one LUT for the show, right? And then they're working in CDLs to match the shots for dailies, right? And then these CDLs are either continue their way through the post finishing, or some post houses discard them all and start from scratch, just with that show LUT, right? So in those ways we are, and we've made it a little easier for people who may not be familiar with a color managed pipeline, right? But obviously, if you're like a documentary filmmaker, or you're someone that works with multiple cameras, and many shows today, it's hard to find a show that only has one camera type on it, right? So what happens is then you create a reference. So now you've put on your show LUT, you take a shot, you select a shot, you then move your industry standard color grading tools, either your lift, gamma, gain, or printer lights. And those, until you're happy with the reference look, the reference shot, okay? Now you have the ability to set these per scene, right? So you can match, you can have 5 scenes in your timeline, set one reference for each scene. You press one button and it runs a match using the reference for each scene, for each individual scene, right? So it then, after it does that processing, it essentially updates all of those shots in a timeline with a CDL or printer light adjustment, which is, again, totally non-destructive. So you can go in there and just tweak and go from there, right?
So are you guys system agnostic in terms of color grading systems? Do you work with all of them?
So the way that our Resolve workflow works is that you will launch DaVinci Resolve. It needs to be DaVinci Resolve Studio, has to be a full license of Studio to enable this sort of round trip feature. And what you do is, if you have a timeline inside Resolve, you will then go into launch Colourlab.Ai on the same computer, and you can press a button that says Resolve Import, and it will automatically pull the timeline into Colourlab.Ai. And then you will do your color matching, and then you can export it back to DaVinci Resolve. So then it essentially automatically writes the nodes in the node tree for the CDLs or printer lights and the 3D LUTs into Resolve. And then you can keep working and grading and do your exports from Resolve. So in the future, so part of the future roadmap, so that's what we're launching with. That's what the product will launch with, the only integration that it will launch with. It will also have basic render out functionality. So that's not in the beta that the beta testers are doing. We'll talk more about the beta program in a minute. But right now, that's coming in like next week, I think, the render out is. So right now, if you were using the beta right now today, you'd have to go in and out of Resolve to even use the application, right? So we are adding basic render, and then we will follow with a number of integrations. For example, we're going to be doing base light. We're hopefully going to be doing Pomfret. We're hopefully going to be doing Assimilate Scratch. We're going to be doing color front. And we'll, of course, are going to be implementing Open Timeline, which will give us very tight Final Cut Pro X, Premiere, and Avid workflows. So essentially, we're going to work with everybody that wants to work with us, and even the people that don't want to work with us.
So for people to beta test the product, it's $99, which is a little right? Am I?
Yes, no, that's right, except they can't do it anymore because it was limited to 500 people. So that's the sort of twist with what we did. So what we did at launch was we made a couple of strategic decisions. First of all, both Dado and I really feel like the traditional sort of beta test model is highly flawed because everyone raises their hand to be a beta tester and very few people actually provide meaningful feedback and actually test and then interact with it. So basically what we did was we on the launch, we said, okay, we're limiting this to 500 people. And we are charging $99. And for that $99, you're in the program, you get immediate beta access. And also, when we launch the product, you'll get a 1-year license for free.
Where can people go to find out more?
Colourlab.ai.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.